I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everybody? Mike Kadlick here. Taylor Kyle's there, all the way in Florida, I believe.
Florida, baby, yeah.
Florida. We have truly remote Taylor Kyle's here, getting ready for draft week, taking in some sun before we get into the craziness that is this weekend. But there's no stopping. Yeah, I was going to say there's no stopping the Patriots Daily Train, though. So we are here. We'll make it happen. And as always, we have a Monday mailbag for you guys. We are powered by Prize Picks and Game Time today, and obviously on the CLNS Media Network. So make sure you subscribe to the channel here, Patriots Press Pass, for all of our Patriots coverage, especially this week, as it's not only silly season, it's not only draft season, but it's Patriots really having a couple picks in front of them that could potentially change the trajectory of the franchise. And it sounds a little cliche there, but you have your coach, you have your quarterback, you have the 4th pick, and now it's time to kind of add the next couple pieces. So on that note, Taylor, we will get to Ashton Jeanty, because I know that you have turned into a complete Ashton Jeanty stan at this point. There are questions on Jeanty in the mailbag, so we'll get to it there. But there was a couple Patriots nuggets from Adam Schefter this morning on ESPN. We'll get to a couple of those before we dive into the mailbag. We have some preloaded, but anyone who is here, feel free to drop questions in the chat as well. EJ already says here, Taylor not poolside. What the heck? I know you teased it on Twitter.
Yeah, I really thought about just like propping it up, and I was like, it's probably going to be more trouble than it's worth. It's already hard being in the sun. As like Mike knows, we're at Gillette and at a Patriot place. Like recording as a black man in the sun is a pain in the ass. So I was like, you know what? Let me just cut out the middleman and do the simple thing. But I considered it. I did.
You should have. But no, I've been there too, trying to podcast in Florida. You sit out there, you get hot, you get sweaty. It's disgusting. That the Wi-Fi is all bad. You're better off in the AC. Happy draft week, everybody. Everyone's wishing us a happy draft week in the chat. It's finally here. Braylon says thanks for what we do. We appreciate the thank yous, and we're excited because it is NFL draft week. So I mentioned a couple nuggets I wanted to get to from Schefter. He dropped a NFL draft intel column this morning. Not a ton around the Patriots. It's been relatively quiet on that front for really the majority of this offseason. Their lips are sealed down in Foxborough. But he does note that, as we've kind of figured out at this point, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter are expected to be gone by the number 4 pick. He did note that contrary to internet speculation, the Eagles are not going to trade A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, did you see someone stole his car in Philly this morning?
Yeah, and he's like, I'll give you, he sounded like Liam Neeson. I was like, he's like, I'll give you a chance before I call the cops. But then the second part of it sounded like, are you going to call the cops? Or are you actually about to go Batman in like,
he's like, I'm taking this into my own hands is what it sounded like. So hopefully he gets his car back. But even still, as Schefter said, it sounds like he will be staying put in Philadelphia. Not that was really, up for debate, I guess. I felt like it's been pretty stern that he was going to stay there. But with the Mike Vrabel connection and kind of the stuff he said about wide receivers this offseason, felt like that could be something there. But another wide receiver storyline that caught my eye and caught many in Patriots land's eye is the fact that Kayshon Boutte was included on a list of players who could be traded on their rookie contracts. Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated had that same nugget in his column this morning on SI.com as well. So wanted to get your thoughts on Boutte and kind of his expendability, if that is a word. It sounds like a word in this context. We'll do it. And kind of, where you see his fit or potential not fit in the room.
Expendability is a word. Very good.
Let's go.
Very good, my friend. But Kayshon Boutte has honestly been the name I feel like most of us have kind of forgotten about. And a lot of that is because you signed Stephon Diggs, you signed Matt Collins, 2 guys who've had success in Josh McDaniels' offenses. And considering what they bring in a very young receiver room, you'd think that they're as close to, virtual locks as it gets, especially, Diggs, if he's healthy, and Matt Collins. He doesn't seem like one, but really I just feel like, as a person and just the consistency he's brought in his career for his role as a wide receiver, 4 type, he's been pretty solid. And then, of course, Jalen Polk, I think he's a virtual lock as well, unless he just has a horrible summer. I don't see, the franchise, even in the new regime, getting rid of a second-round pick who was just put in a really unfortunate situation last year. Javon Baker's a little bit different. From what I've heard, which isn't a ton, but like Jalen Polk, I've heard good things about him taking on to the offense and really getting it under his belt. I haven't heard the same things for Javon Baker, and I think he's the kind of guy who's going to need a pretty great summer to keep himself from getting cut. But Pop Douglas, and of course, he's the most obvious guy when you talk about productivity over the past few years. He's been one of the only consistent players for you. So Pop Douglas, Jalen Polk, Matt Collins, Stephon Diggs, and then you throw Kendrick Bourne into that mix if you want to, because, Kayshon Boutte, how high is his ceiling really? Because I was hoping he'd be a yak threat who could challenge vertically on goal balls like we've seen, but the yak part hasn't really been there. And then he's inconsistent when it comes to the catch point. Like, he's got a bunch of drops, even though he's made some incredible contested catches. So it's, I'm not really sure what you have in him. And then when you also consider as much as he did mature last year and take a step forward, is he going to be like the leader in the room? I don't necessarily think so. And I also don't think you want an offense that's necessarily like Boutte, Polk, and then Diggs or whatever that combination is. So I understand why he's being floated in trade talks. But at the same time, if he isn't, I think he will have a chance this summer to assert himself. And if he continues to build, he could end up being one of the more productive players this summer. But at the same time, new regime wanting to set the tone in that room. Maybe they just want a lot of fresh blood. And as productive as Kayshon Boutte was, as much as he improved last season, I don't think he's someone that you look at as being very secure on the roster. And with so many other guys that you'd expect that would probably be able to contribute more. Kendrick Bourne's already been in a Josh McDaniels system. It does feel like a bit of an uphill climb.
So on that, we won't get into the full mailbag just yet, but we did have one question on Boutte versus Demario Douglas. So I kind of want to pull that up and piggyback that onto our conversation here. And at TPetty37 asks, which wide receiver on the depth chart should the Patriots replace if it were between Pop Douglas and Kayshon Boutte? And adding the context you sort of just mentioned with, the X position, the outside receiver position versus the slot, because you kind of have both covered right now in theory. It's not great options by any means, but you have Pop in the slot. You have Boutte, you have Diggs, you have, I guess, Javon Baker sort of guys. Matt Collins you mentioned as well. They kind of have their basis there, but if you look at the draft and where they may attack the wide receiver position, like the Kayshon Boutte rumors to me say that if and when they do ultimately attack wide receiver, it's going to be on the outside, or it could be on the outside, which makes Boutte then expendable, where Pop not essentially being listed there means that they're comfortable with him and his role in the offense. But if there was a slot receiver in the draft, call it Xavier Restrepo, call it anyone really, I guess I won't, pin it down on anybody. Who would you prefer to replace if they could get anyone, whether it's an outside or inside guy in the draft?
I'll go with outside and inside. Inside, if there was going to be an upgrade over Pop, I'd say it's probably Jalen Noel. Okay. I think he isn't quite as twitchy, so he's not as effective against man coverage, but I think he's more well-rounded. He gives you better verticality. I think they're both really good at the catch point, and they play bigger than they are. But whereas Demario Douglas, I think he's like 190. He's big for his size, but Jalen Noel's about 200 pounds. And Pop is someone where we've seen in the past, like he's had the concussions his first year. You don't love the idea of a guy, again, even though he's big for a guy of his height, he's still not someone you want taking a bunch of hits over the middle. I think Jalen Noel would be able to handle those more. And again, the verticality is really the biggest thing for me that I think he could bring there. And on the outside, I just think they tried to stick Kayshon Boutte in that kind of X role for a while because they didn't have anybody else who could really win those one-on-one matchups. I think I'd like Trey Harris in that role more because I think he brings more of the typical size where he's over 6 feet tall. He's got long arms. He's powerful. He's really great working the sideline. Something that Kayshon Boutte's never really shown he can actually do. Because then if you want to say, okay, we know that he's not really an X. Ideally, he's a Z. Or I know some people have come on the show and said that they like him as a power slot. And I don't really mind that either. But my thing is, okay, if he's a Z, he's not really a great separator. He's good, but he's not great. And again, he doesn't give you that much after the catch or verticality in terms of speed or great contested catchability down there. So it's like, yeah, at that point, I'd rather a Trey Harris who can go up and get some of those passes and make some of those bigger plays. So Trey Harris on the outside, Jalen Noel inside. But even still, I think that Pop, even if they did get another slot receiver, we've seen Josh McDaniels use those types in tandem. I don't really think that if they did get another slot type, it would move Pop off the roster or anything. But like you said, outside receiver is where they needed the spot to be addressed the most for the Kyle Williams or a Trey Harris, whomever it is. So again, just kind of ties back to why Booty might be on the outside looking in.
Yeah. Reading through some comments, my friend Pat in the chat says, Bourne, Booty, Baker all won't be here next year. What are your thoughts on? Like, I feel like Baker, Booty would make sense to not be here. I have a hard time at this point in time thinking that Kendrick Bourne, is not going to be here. You mentioned it before, but the familiarity in Josh McDaniel's system and kind of what he was able to bring, or what he does bring from a leadership perspective, although mixed in with like a Matt Collins, Stephon Diggs, where he doesn't have to necessarily be the guy in the room, but he's still someone who brings a lot of energy. Played with Josh before, had a good year with Josh. I have a hard time thinking they're going to move off of him that quickly. But even 1,000 now in the chat too as well says, I think KB is the first wide receiver gone. Says he loves him. But do you think Bourne is as expendable as other people think he is?
Well, I mean, he was almost traded last year, so it's hard for me to sit here and say no.
Maybe it's just because I'm a fan of him. Like I think he's.
That's and I feel the same way. And that always comes up when we talk about the KB trade talks. It sucks because we like the person and we've seen what he could do in a Josh offense, and it was really exciting. But there's also the fact that he's getting older. And second year off his ACL, maybe he's a lot better. But also because he's older, maybe there's not a significant difference in how much better he plays. Obviously, you hope there is. And the fact that
good point here in the chat too. All the wide receivers are expendable. Yes, I mean, it's fair. It's a bad room. No, none of them are lock. I think maybe the number one lock, as you mentioned, would be Jalen Polk, just because of the capital they used to draft him in the first place. Everybody else, even a guy, I mean, okay, Diggs, Matt Collins, non-expendable because they're first-year guys. But like anybody else, even a Pop Douglas, 6th-round pick, has been up and down, has a lot of potential. But if they don't see it and if there's somebody else there, it wouldn't totally shock me if they somehow, some way ended up moving on from even a guy like him.
Yeah, because as much as we like Pop, he's not the most QB friendly. The size is an issue. And while you can use him like on RPOs, and that kind of helps in the run game where he's not a great blocker, still, like he's not a well-rounded player. He's a guy who's very good at certain things, but he should never be really the first or second option in your offense, and that's what he's been for the past couple years.
Right. All right, that's some wide receiver talk here. We'll get into plenty more of it throughout the mailbag, but and hold on, I want to get that off the screen. We'll get to many more of it throughout the mailbag. We'll start that up in a second. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. We'll be right back. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. And all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It is the NBA playoffs. They are officially here, and the action is heating up on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on all of your favorite sports. Think LeBron James will get more than 24 points? You think Giannis will have more than 35? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts, projections on the board up to 15 to 25% with Taco Tuesdays. And they also have Flex Fridays. So make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup to be eligible for this protected play. And all you got to do is download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. That's Prize Picks. Head over there, use that code CLNS, $50 instantly after you play $5. So if you got interested in the in that realm, fantasy sports, head over to Prize Picks and help us out with that code CLNS. All right, mailbag time, Taylor. Let's look big picture, big-ish picture, with a question here from Pat's Planet, who asks, what would your best case scenario for picks in rounds 1, 2, and both thirds be? And he adds, obviously speaking realistic possibilities. So in my mind, that immediately takes off Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. I don't think they're going to be there. But what would your first 3 rounds look like in an ideal world for the Patriots?
It's pretty funny. I was actually just going through this. I was like writing, literally during the break, I was writing it down because I'm thinking of doing something on this. The first round, I think, one thing I'll say, I was watching Will Campbell tape. I just uploaded it against like Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, guys who were drafted last year to see how he did.
I don't know what that means. What is that reaction? Good or bad?
The ways that he lost were just so unnerving for someone who might get picked top 5. And I understand the class and everything. And I've come to terms with like Will Campbell. I like him as a player, but man, it's just like it's intimidating. And it's why in my mock I picked Jeanty, and that was also because I've gone through different scenarios. I've gone through Travis Hunter, I've done Will Campbell, done Jalen Walker, and got to Ashton Jeanty with my last one.
Okay, you know what then, Taylor? On that, I want to add this question in and just kind of get it, frankly, off the board. And I don't mean it like that. But someone asked, what percentage of mock drafts are close every year? It seems pretty low. And on what you just said, a lot of times people think mock drafts are like people trying to predict what's going to happen and like want to be right or wrong.
Right.
And everyone gets so upset. Why do you do so many mock drafts? And like one of my buddies used to joke with me a couple years ago when I was doing the shows with Barth, like, if you just pick everyone, you're going to be right every time. And that's not, at least for me, why I do this or why we do this.
No.
It's to get familiar with different players in different situations. Like I saw today, Evan posted one for Pats.com. He took Membu at 4th overall. And everyone's like, well, last week you said Campbell. And it's like, that's the point of doing different iterations. It's not to, and it's so like, I kind of wanted to, not to call out this person specifically, but at least on this show and a lot of at least Patriot-centric shows, and I think when a guy like Daniel Jeremiah posts his top 32, that is maybe him predicting, but also him using his information to kind of tell us and tell readers.
So his mocks are based on, he says he mocks with his ears and his big board is with his eyes.
Right.
So the rankings for his players, that's what he thinks. His mocks are where like whatever people are telling him where he feel like the vibes are at that given point in time.
And so that to me is more of a projection and not trying to be right, but being like, this is what it sounds like is going to happen. Where when we do mock 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's not us thinking, well, this is going to happen now. It's to kind of put different scenarios, learn the players. And so on that note, you mentioned on the back one where you've done Jeanty, you've done Walker, you've done Campbell, and it's not like you're necessarily, or when I was writing mocks last year, trying to cover all your bases. It's more so trying to see what guys could be there and why they would or could make sense for the Patriots. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that kind of, it looped in there when you had mentioned that you'd done a bunch of different ones in the first round.
No, I think that's important. And one thing I'd like to add is for me, it's really helpful doing different versions because I can go back and see where things were and how they progressed over the course of the past few months. So, because I did Travis Hunter first, and that was when Travis Hunter seemed like a legitimate possibility.
I know.
And now it's something we don't even
What a fun week that was.
Exactly. So like mock drafts are important, but really they are thought experiments. It's just a reason for me to be like, okay. And also you kind of hit dead ends sometimes. Like this week, I realized I didn't like any of the tackles when you get past Campbell, Membu, and Ursary. I was like, I'm not a huge fan of any of that. Like Josh Simmons, of course, but the knee, there's the off-field stuff, or just like character concerns. There have been some questions about that. So it's like, really, if it's not Ursary, then you really start feeling uncomfortable if it's a second round. So it just shows you how badly they need to tackle. Or, for wide receivers, where I like Kyle Williams, Jalen Noel. And sometimes I wait a little bit longer to take receivers. And I'm like, there's a significant, drop here. And you start to get a better idea of where the meat is at these different positions. So they're very valuable in that sense. First, I've come to the conclusion based on just I've not heard enough people say that they think Arvon Membu could play left tackle as a rookie. That I think it's a legitimate possibility. So I guess my first would probably be Ashton Jeanty because I want a blue chip. If we're talking realistic possibilities, the blue chip type guys are Ashton Jeanty. And then it's, you could say Mason Graham, depending on what kind of bucket you fall into, but everyone knows he's a really good player. I do think the Patriots really need a left tackle. So Jeanty 1, then Will Campbell 2nd. And then if it's the Jeanty scenario, the second round, I like Ursary. I don't think there's a whole lot of things about Ursary, like significant things that you don't really get, or with Campbell, that you don't get with Ursary. Like Ursary was a captain. You look at tape, he's a bit streaky in his mean streak, but against Penn State, if you can extrapolate that to most of his games against Penn State, that's a really fun add at left tackle. And then, of course, maybe he has to switch positions, but the same can be said for Will Campbell down the road. So I would go Ursary. Then after that, the second is kind of tough for me. I don't love a lot of the receivers in that range for the Patriots. I'd probably rather go with like an edge rusher, whether it's a Landon Jackson. If they really like Femi Oladejo, I think he's too much of a project for me to like him in the second round. But if you like the tools and you think you can, work him out quickly, that's fine. Princely Uman Mielen, if they want a situational rusher with juice who has different moves and a lot of fluidity, and not necessarily a bigger guy, I could see him being on the radar. And then third round, I love Jalen Noel and Trey Harris. If either of those guys fall, I will be extremely happy. And then in the second round, I throw the defensive tackles in there. Like I like Derek Harmon a lot, even though he can't tackle, which is what I've heard recently. Alfred Collins, he's a bit streaky, but he's a monster in the middle. A lot of great defensive line talent in that second round that I would like to take a look at. And then the third round is where I like the receiver. So a Noel, a Kyle Williams, a Trey Harris, and any of those guys fall, I'd be very happy taking one.
All right, so my quick best case scenario, you're disappointing me with the Will Campbell talk about the, some of those dominant SEC guys last year. But again, like you said,
he had his wins, but the losses were so unsettling. Jaden Daniels concussion, where he loses inside immediately, and then he gets taken. Oh, it was bad, man. And he lost like that last year against, was it Kennard? I think it was Kennard, beat him inside and like took out the quarterback's legs. And that's the one that every time I think of like, oh, he's not very broad, my mind goes to that, where it's like he gets beat and there's just not enough of him to even stop those guys.
So with all of that, I still think I take Will Campbell at 4 in my best overall. On the 2 third-round picks, I use one of them to trade up in the second round and go get Ted McMillan. You get your receiver. I think that's reasonable if he falls, depending on what happens, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. And then in the third round, take the best edge player available and help your defensive line on that front. And I'm going to parlay this into our next question because Taylor, as you know, and we won't get entirely into it. Maybe we'll do an entire episode on this at some point, or at least a stand-up, but I can't justify Ashton Jeanty at number 4. I just can't do it. It's the running back thing. I've been on running backs for even before I was covering football, when I was just shooting the shit about the game with my friends. I've never been a running backs help win championships type of guy. And Saquon Barkley did it this year, but there's, we've talked about this on the show where they took him and they dropped him into one of the best rosters in football, and he helped them win the Super Bowl at that time. But at the end of the day, I still think Philly would have been close to, if not in a similar spot. You look back at the New York Giants when they drafted Saquon number 2 overall, and that never really helped them get over the hump. And I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah on a podcast this morning, and he's sort of now granted, he's also somebody who has mocked Ashton Jeanty to the Patriots in the past and said that they should take him or could take him to help Drake May because they need help on offense. But he sort of mentioned how running back should be they can be taken in premium spots or with premium picks if the rest of your team has already filled the rest of the holes and you can drag and drop them into a team to help them succeed. So he mentioned like the Chicago Bears at number 10, where they've fully addressed the offensive line in free agency, and they've addressed wide receiver with Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen's not there anymore, but the DJ Moore is there. They signed him to his extension. They have their quarterback. So that's a situation where you feel comfortable dropping a running back in and kind of letting Ben Johnson work with them there. With the Patriots, they still have just too many jarring needs at tackle, at wide receiver, where I just don't see Ashton Jeanty's drag and drop with, if you haven't figured out the offensive line just yet and you still don't have a wide receiver to take some pressure off of it offensively. So I'm still fully against Jeanty at number 4, but I want to take that and I want to have you maybe convince me based on your latest mock with the next question asked by EJJMZ. Based on the mock, if Jeanty is the pick at 4, how do you think he'll be used compared to the rest of the running back room? And why should they take a running back at number 4, Taylor? Because I can't see the vision right now, and I need help seeing it. Because I need help over these next 4 days, because if we get to Thursday and we're on our live stream and they take them, I may lose my mind. So I need you to talk me off the ledge.
So my thing is with Will Campbell, right? The reasons we think he should be taken are he's been in the SEC. He's a great leader. He's very physical and he's got all the great character things, and he's athletic, and that's really what the profile is. But most people agree that he's have you heard anyone say he's going to be a great tackle? People never say great.
They always resort to guard.
And if they say great, they don't say tackle.
Right.
So that's my thing. It's like, okay, you want to get a great guard, maybe he's a Hall of Fame guard, right? You can kick guards in the second round, dude. I'm sorry. And like, I like Will Campbell. If they take him, like, I get it. I understand fully. But he's not a blue chip tackle. He might be a blue chip guard, right? And then, obviously, I would say a guard is more valuable than a running back, but guards fall in that similar category of like, you're not really trying to choose a guard with premium assets.
Right.
Then the other option is, okay, Jalen Walker. But Jalen Walker is also a tweener who is probably not going to be a full-time starter when he first gets drafted, and is going to have to be used a certain type of way. And I don't think he's a blue chip talent in any facet other than his character. So then if you're talking about guys who are like dominant at their position, I'm sorry, the way that Will Campbell lost, I cannot call that dominant. It happened too many times. And I'm talking about like 2023. People thought that what I uploaded was him as a freshman. That was 2 years ago, which he improved, but there were still the same losses. Now with Mason Graham, it's the size thing, right? Like there are still questions because he doesn't have everything for you to say he's an all-pro, because you need to just do so many, and he does do a lot of things well. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, but there are some concerns. Ashton Jeanty, the only concern is his position. That's it. Everyone knows he's not a home run hitter all the time, but he's elite at making people miss, which is the entire job of running back. And he's not just a runner. He's also a receiver. He isn't someone who ran like the crazy route tree or anything, but he's got reliable hands. He makes catches outside of his frame. And you think like defensive linemen and linebackers can't tackle him. You think defensive backs are going to do it in space when it's screens and it's, swings and all that. I don't think so. So I think he can be a weapon in the run game, in the pass game, taking some pressure off Drake May as a check down option, what have you, like James White was. Like, we cannot emphasize how much of an asset James White was as a receiver.
But would you take James White at 4 overall?
No, I mean, if he were also an Ashton Jeanty level runner, I would consider it. But also the pass protection, where that's not even, I wouldn't say it's a strength, but with a lowercase s. Like, he's not killing dudes in pass pro. Where like LaQuint Allen, sometimes I'm like, damn, I like that. But, I could see where Ashton Jeanty could become that with better technique. So I'm like, this is a true blue chip player who makes your team significantly better. And if you add him, your question is not the player. Your question is the fit. And it's like, oh, who's he going to run behind? Let's not forget, Mike Nwuenu's still on the team. And now he is the right guard. He's not the right tackle / right guard. He is the right guard. Beside him is Morgan Moses, one of the biggest human beings in the NFL, who's also a very good run blocker. And Garrett Bradbury, obviously, you don't want him one-on-one in pass pro. He's not an overwhelming run blocker. But Brandon Thorne even mentioned that next to guys like Mike Nwuenu and maybe Layden Robinson, he'll look a lot better. And then Layden. Like, we were really complaining about Layden Robinson as a run blocker so much. It was the things you expected. It was the pass protection. We're literally talking about only left tackle. And if it's Ursery, or if, hopefully not Vidarian Lowe, but if it's like Colton Miller, you're telling me Ashton Jeanty can't make do with a line of Garrett Bradbury, who's still an NFL starter, Mike Nwuenu, Morgan Moses, and Layden Robinson? I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit on that. I think he.
So Colton Miller changes the equation as well.
I think a stable left tackle is at least where you're like, okay, he's not going to get backdoored, or it's not going to be like Vidarian, where sometimes he loses so fast the run doesn't have a chance to really pop, or he's like holding guys and all those things that complicated the run game. Because last year, the issue with the run game, a lot of it was that they right tackle and center were just massive weaknesses because you had so many guys going through, guys weren't starters, and then Mike Nwuenu couldn't settle into a position. Now you have veterans, you have stability. Hopefully Layden Robinson takes a step. If that happens and you get Ariante Ursery in the second and he's a functional left tackle, then I think Ashton Jeanty makes all the sense in the world. And even still, next year, if you decide I'm going all in on defense, but the first 2 picks, I'm going with 2 offensive linemen, that's a very different offensive line already. So I understand the line isn't where people want it to be, but Ashton Jeanty, like Drake May, is someone who elevates the talent around him. So if you have an average line, Drake May elevates an average line. Ashton Jeanty takes an average line, makes it above average, and then once you continue to build around him, and this is a guy you're hoping is on your team for like a couple of contracts, right? This isn't just a rookie deal guy. You're taking him with the 5th pick. So this is someone you continue to build the trenches. And then once they're stacked, because you've gone years of continuing to use premium capital, or guys want to be on your team, then that backfield looks terrifying. So that's my case for it, is that they have a good enough run blocking offensive line right now, and you can continue to build around it with Drake May and Ashton Jeanty as your building blocks in the backfield that take pressure off of everyone else in the offense.
Something in that rant, not rant, it was a good rant, because I'm getting there, like, as far as this Jeanty thing. And I look at, I compare it to Saquon and the Eagles thing, where the Giants were not great with Saquon, even though they took him there and he was a good back. But the Giants
also
didn't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Patriots do. So that does.
If they didn't have a quarterback, I would probably feel different.
Right. That changes things. It really
Even if there was
does.
a true left tackle, like if Josh Simmons had never gotten hurt, you would not hear me saying this. I would not say this. If there was a true left tackle, I would absolutely be advocating for that person over Jeanty.
Yeah.
But I don't think Will Campbell's really a great left tackle. I'm sorry, I don't. And I think you can get that guy next year. You're telling me 1 year of like average left tackle play is worth not getting a blue chip player, one of the only ones you even have a chance at taking? Come on, man. Like, again, I am saying I would not typically take a running back over left tackle. I think that's insane.
Mhm.
But I just don't think that Will Campbell is good enough to justify passing on what could be a potential Hall of Fame player. He's getting cops from Dane Brugler to LaDainian Tomlinson. Would you rather have LaDainian Tomlinson or Brandon Scherf / Taylor Decker? You tell me. Who do you want?
I know. Well, even call it Zach Martin is another one too, who played left tackle at Notre Dame.
Like, I can't call a guy who's never played guard Zach Martin. I can't.
Okay, but no. So I guess my point was I would still take LT over.
Oh yeah.
Over Zach Martin. That's
in the debate. I can see that being debatable.
Sure.
You're telling me you would take Taylor Decker or even Brandon Scherf. I
Right.
respect the hell out of both guys over a LaDainian Tomlinson type. You're lying.
Right.
You're
Exactly.
lying if you say that.
No, that's fair, and I can't fully buy in yet. But
I get it. It took me a while to get here too, and this is just
Yeah.
such a weird draft. It's
I know.
making me say things I don't want to say.
So-
but like it's.
And so on the blue chip talk, there's a question about Mason Graham here that I want to get to. But before we get there, a quick word from our friends at Game Time. But also I do want to note, quick note from our lovely producer, Amit. We are releasing some film drops across the week this week from some of the ones that were behind our paywall. So like today, for example, Travis Hunter, full film drop going up at 4 p.m. for free. So make sure you keep it locked in here on Press Pass. And check that out. But again, before we get to the rest of the mailbag, we just spent a long time on Jeanty. I knew we would. I knew it would happen.
That's a good clip. You're welcome, Amit.
Yeah, exactly. We have some promo now. But we'll get back to the rest of the mailbag. We'll go rapid fire before we get out of here on the last couple of questions. But before we do, word from Game Time. We'll be right back. Patriots Daily is powered by Game Time, the best place to get last-minute tickets to your favorite events. And with the NBA playoffs officially here, we all know it's better to go see games in person. So make sure you use the Game Time app to get to your favorite team's games today. They have last-minute deals with killer prices. You also get the all-in pricing feature, views from your seat, the lowest price guaranteed, and so much more. And Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA playoff tickets. I'm heading in to Boston this week to watch them take on the Magic. And I use the Game Time app because it is the best place, my favorite place, to get tickets to your favorite games with their last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off by buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. They changed our tagline. No more Game Time. Sorry, but that's Game Time. And as I mentioned in the read, I am heading into Boston this week to check out Celtics Magic. And I did use the Game Time app. Unfortunately, as I said in the read, tickets get lower as the game time approaches. I already purchased my tickets, so I got in with an all-in price of $194. Now the low is $179. So they're continuing to trickle down as the game approaches. So if you're going to wait outside the Garden, if you're going to try and get in on tickets and want to wait till the last minute, the prices will go down. So head over to Game Time and use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Taylor, you have one more point on Ashton Jeanty before we continue the mailbag. So what do you got?
Because I think there was a fair point. People were saying we need a left tackle, not a running back. And that part I totally get. The reason that I really got on board with this Jeanty thing and started to think it was a legitimate possibility was this quote from Mike Vrabel last week that I didn't really read, because when I read it initially, I thought he was talking about a Will Campbell type. But then I read it again with the thought of Jeanty, and I was like, I actually think this would make more sense. So this is what Mike Vrabel said when asked about weighing best player available versus need with the 4th overall pick, and kind of in general. We certainly want to pick the best player as many times as we can, and the player that we think at that point is the best player. Then we'll figure it out. Maybe you look at one position and we may have some returning starters, or we feel like they're starters, or there's depth at that position. But to add premium players when available is something that you should probably always try to do. That doesn't sound like left tackle. That doesn't really sound like receiver, because they sidestep on. They know that they don't have receivers set.
Right. They don't have the depth there. Yeah.
That sounds like running back, because you have a starter in Ramondre. You have depth in Antonio Gibson and maybe Terrell Jennings if they like him. But they're saying no. And I like this philosophy. I respect it, of saying, no, I want to get the great player, because Ramondre, maybe we can trade him, if he doesn't want to stay, or, you can figure those things out. Sometimes it's not like quarterback. You can't really do that. If you're paying two receivers like a ton of money and you can't trade them away to draft another guy when he doesn't fit, like those things are ridiculous. But like, you have a ton of money. That's another thing. Running back, drafting it early. One of the things like with tight end is you're paying them all that money.
Yeah.
Patriots have so much.
Have it.
Don't care. So that's one other thing I wanted to mention is it might seem dumb to draft at a position where you have all this depth. Mike Vrabel literally said basically that Ashton Jeanty is someone they would still consider. He didn't say his name, but everything around that is basically Ashton Jeanty.
Using that quote, think of defensive tackle just for a minute. Nathan writes, if we consider Barmore may not be in good health, why not draft Mason Graham? He is another one of these 5 to 6 maybe blue chip players in this draft, if not like 3 to 5. There, there's not many. It's it's tight up at the top of the draft, but Mason Graham is one of those out of Michigan. And if you think of the entire defensive line as far as depth goes, like you do have Barmore, you do have Milton Williams, you do have Keon White. Some of those guys, they've sort of let some go in your Dietrich Wise and Devon Gottschall. But would you consider Mason Graham at the pick? Is this someone who, you think about Vrabel's quote and just trying to bring in the best player available, and you worry about the depth at those positions later. Are we overlooking Graham a bit as far as the number 4 pick goes?
I don't think so. Because one, I just think that he's not the perfect prospect that you kind of want there. And I think they could still use Mason Graham. Like, I don't want to say this is one of those where it just wouldn't make a lot of sense, because like if you are going to play a 4 down front with Barmore and Milton Williams, and if they're going to do what they've done in the past where they don't really rotate very often, then it wouldn't be the wisest investment, I don't think. But for me, it's just that while I do like Mason Graham, there were also games like against Texas where there were certain matchups against big guys who were patient, where just he didn't have the overwhelming physical tools to be able to capitalize on some of his technical prowess. And that's really the bigger thing for me. Now, none of these prospects are perfect, and that's the thing. I would say to a degree, I think Mason Graham is being a bit overlooked. Maybe I should even talk about him more, because he's like a phenomenal athlete. He's got the wrestling background, which like former wrestlers, the translation to football is so easy. Like I understand film better because I used to wrestle, and I understand like, oh yeah, I would want to like with contact points where I understand like you want to get a guy's elbow or like under his pits, because there's not a whole lot you can do. Like with wrestling, I would try to do the same thing. So it makes a lot of sense. And with Mason Graham, you can see that. And then he's got the quickness and the block recognition. He's a fantastic player. So maybe like if they chose Mason Graham, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be stunned or anything like that, just because it feels like they love Will Campbell, even if they don't think he's a career left tackle. And it's not like they think he's a left tackle, but you want to maximize a player that might not be his spot. But Mason Graham deserves more love. I do think he's a better overall player, make more of an impact potentially than a Will Campbell would at left tackle. But also, I don't know. I can't say position to be. I can't say that. So
I know.
But also because I think Ashton Jeanty is like not perfect, but like damn near. Like the only thing he doesn't give you is that elite speed, and that's not really going to kill you as a running back. With that, it's like at receiver, it's great to have, but quickness is more important. And with Graham, that's true, but also just it helps to be massive when you play in the middle of the defensive line. Yeah,
there's not enough smoke around Graham to the Pats for me to, I guess, consider it. I feel like
that's another thing. There's been no smoke.
So I wonder if that's purposeful, if you will, and maybe they just haven't said anything because they know he's going to be there and they're just going to take him.
And that'll be an interesting thing to see to now be able to reflect and say, okay, what did the top visits mean? Like, what did the fact that they didn't show interest in guys, where they were at the Senior Bowl, like where Vrabel's looking at the defensive linemen and all that. So it'll be very interesting to see.
And I think we talked about this last week, where there's sometimes where just guys don't visit and teams don't like. I think the Jaguars don't do visits at all. Some teams do them with players they don't want to take.
And with the Jags, they mentioned that part of the reason is they think there's like an implicit bias. Or like if you see a guy early, then you might like him more. Or if you see a guy more recently and he just takes your breath away, then he's going to be higher in your mind than a guy you saw like 2 months ago, which makes sense. But I also feel like there's still, I don't know.
You're still missing out on valuable information, I feel like. Yeah.
Right. I think it's kind of silly to not ever, unless you know that person or there's some avenue where like the person's like Vrabel, right? I'm sure he's tapped in, or BC. Like he doesn't need to bring Pillow in. He knows everything he needs to know about the kid. So there's those, but there's also guys where like if your background's a little bit of a mystery or there's some concerns like with Josh Simmons. One reason I think Josh Simmons might not be as much on their board is they didn't bring him in at all that we know of, like for a 30 visit. But hey, maybe he gets drafted and we find out that he did and it wasn't reported. So again, there's a whole lot of like weirdness around this time that it's dangerous to look too much into.
And like Penix last year, we talked about it, but I'll mention it again. Like, didn't go on a visit at all in Atlanta. Nobody thought they liked him, and then they took him at 8. So it's, I use the term maybe too much, but it's silly season, and it especially is this week. So, actually, want to steer away from the draft for our last 2 questions here, Taylor. We'll wrap it up with these 2. Who on the Patriots roster outside of May and Gonzalez will have the biggest effect on winning in 2025?
That's a great question.
I know.
I'd say Mike Nwenu.
Okay.
Mike Nwenu or Christian Barmore. One of those 2 guys in the middle of the trenches. Because I think that if like Mike Nwenu plays like the Pro Bowl / All-Pro guard that we've always said that he could be, that means your run game was fantastic. I think it also, at least that he was great in pass protection. And that's, with Morgan Moses and Garrett Bradbury, because if he's playing well, the guys next to him probably look better, right? It's kind of hard to be an all-pro or anything like that, and the guys next to you suck, because at some point that's going to trickle down whether it's fair or not. So I think but also Barmore, we've seen that he can single-handedly make up for holes all around him. So if Barmore's healthy, I think this can be a truly elite. Yeah, so I'll go with Barmore, because I think if he's healthy, he makes this an elite defense.
I kind of forgot Milton Williams, but
sorry, real quick.
Like Milton Williams seems like an obvious answer too. Like he's just like a top tier talent on this team, but Barmore being there also adds another layer to what he can potentially do. But my mind immediately went to Hunter Henry as just a solid captain level player, which we'll actually get to on our last question. Turned into that security blanket, trustworthy option for Drake May last year. And if you do ultimately improve this offense, he doesn't have to be one of the top options like he sort of had to be last year and even the years prior. So he could sneaky become like a really solid, helpful player, at least winning as far as, I got to go to this guy. I got to have it third down, a touchdown in the red zone, things like that. So I'll be interested to see what Henry does, especially working with Josh McDaniels this season in Foxborough. But let's wrap it up here, Taylor. This one's another fun one, non-draft related. We'll answer plenty of draft questions throughout the week as well here on the show. But who do you think are going to be the Patriots captains next season? This one, again, this is fodder. Like there's nothing to really, dive into here. But I saw this question. I was curious, like, okay, stepping away from the draft for a second, who is sort of going to step up and be this team's leaders in 2025?
Drake May, Morgan Moses.
Yep. That's who I have as well. Hunter Henry was another thought of mine.
Yeah, I could see Hunter. Yeah, Hunter. I think Mac could be Mac Hollins, maybe sneaky. Okay. I think Diggs would if he was going to be on the field, but he's going to miss probably all summer. So I don't.
Yeah, that makes it tough.
Defense, Spillane.
Okay. Gonzo? He's quiet.
Yeah, I don't think he talks enough.
I know.
Joe
Cardona again?
Cardona, yeah.
Okay.
Defense is tough because there's so many new guys.
I know.
And that's like Peppers kind of can't be a captain again.
Right. Duggar did Duggar end up as a captain? Oh, Landry too.
Duggar was, but also like I think we all saw how, not that was his fault or anything, but like he's a quiet guy.
There's a lot going on with him, and he's quiet. Yeah.
Yeah. Landry and Spillane. I don't think Marcus Epps is going to play enough to be a captain.
Right.
Maybe sneaky Carlton Davis. How many defensive captains were there last year? 3?
It was Peppers, and then they
Wise?
took it away from him. Wise,
Bentley.
Peppers, Wise, Bentley.
Yeah.
And then Bentley left, or Bentley got hurt, so they gave it to Duggar. And then when Peppers, I don't think they replaced Pepper. They might have replaced Peppers with like an offensive guy because Hunter Henry ended up getting it. Or Henry got it when Andrews left.
This is so unfair.
It was.
Really unfair.
Last year was a train wreck. It's hard to really, put C's on guys' jerseys.
Whoever they draft with 4 could be a captain. Will Campbell was a 2-time captain. Ashton Jeanty was a captain. Jalen Walker was a captain, and like one of the greatest things that ever happened to the Georgia program, apparently.
Yeah.
So maybe I wouldn't count out a rookie captain, but also that guy would have to be a contributor. Like if Ashton, and also it's hard to establish yourself as a rookie as a running back because most of the offseason is dedicated to you not doing much.
Right.
But Will Campbell, I would probably say, would have a decent shot. But also I think Morgan Moses is going to be the dog in that room for a couple of years.
I was going to say, I think the locks are May, Moses, Spillane, and Cardona.
Yeah.
And then that's 4. And then you maybe probably need somebody else on defense and potentially an offensive guy, which is where I went. Henry, you thought Mac Hollins. Defense, that last defensive guy will be interesting, and it feels like a rotation of maybe Milton Williams. Who knows?
I was gonna say because he works his ass off.
Yeah,
he's done it at a high level. Guys are gonna look. He's the highest paid player on the team in franchise history.
Right.
So guys are gonna look to him one way or another. And Harold Landry, I think, is gonna be. That's why I think Harold Landry could because he's in that same boat. Has he been a captain actually?
I don't know. Captain. I wonder if Carlton Davis has as well.
But I feel like captain in 2024.
Landry was.
Oh wait, it also says he was named the captain for the Patriots. So I don't know if that's right.
Okay.
Let's see. Actually, it doesn't say anywhere. Oh yeah, so I don't know if he was, but he seems like the kind of guy who might be. But yeah, somebody on that defensive line, I'd probably say Milton Williams or Harold Landry.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it here for us today on this mailbag edition of the show. Taylor has to get back to the Sun. I have to get back to SportsIllustrated.com, but we will be here for the rest of the week as the Patriots continue to put their final touches on their draft plan. And Thursday night is the big one. Patriots selecting at number 4 overall. So make sure you keep it here on Patriots Press Pass, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications. You'll get notified every time we or anybody else here on the channel drops a video. We are loaded with Patriots content coming up. Patriots Beat, Greg Bedard Pod, Andrew Callahan on Pat's Interference. We have Matt and Pat at night. So we have a ton of stuff coming as the Patriots continue, like I said, their draft prep. So keep it here. Keep it locked in. Shout out to Prize Picks. Shout out to Game Time for sponsoring the show. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you soon. Peace out, everyone.